Encha, a kingdom blessed with fertile lands and wealth, was led by the wise and powerful Ezenamdi. Despite his kingdom's prosperity, Ezenamdi had one great concern: his daughter, Princess Adana. Unlike the other maidens in Onitsha, who were slender, tall, and graceful, Adana was, in the eyes of the people, a tragedy. She was short, round, and so stout that her body seemed to move in one mass, like a yam tied up in a wrapper. Her face, well, it was the source of many whispers in the market. The villagers often said, if the gods wanted to hide something precious, they would have given it Adana's face. Her nose was flat and wide, her lips thick, and her eyes sat too close together, giving her a constant look of suspicion. For years, not a single man had approached her for marriage. The village youths would rather marry a goat than face the ridicule of being Adana's husband. Even her closest handmaidens struggled to find the right words when describing her, often settling on, she has a good heart. Ezenamdi, a man of pride, couldn't bear to see his daughter unmarried, so in a bold move, he made an offer that rocked the entire kingdom. He announced, "Half of my wealth will go to the man who marries my daughter." Suddenly, the kingdom erupted in excitement. The promise of wealth spread like wildfire, and for the first time, men began to gather, eager to claim the princess. The day of the first suitor's visit was one filled with anticipation. The palace courtyard was prepared, and Princess Adana sat nervously inside, waiting. The first suitor was a young man named Ikenna, known for his bravery in wrestling and his fast tongue. He arrived at the palace with confidence, thinking about the lands and cows he would receive once he married the princess. He strutted into the palace, bowing before Ezenamdi and saying, "My king, I have come to claim your daughter's hand, and with it the wealth you have promised." Ezenamdi smiled. "You may meet her now. Adana, my daughter, come out and greet your suitor." Adana appeared from behind the large doors, her steps slow and steady. She wore her finest attire, but no amount of beads or wrappers could distract from the reality of her appearance. Ikenna's smile froze the moment he laid eyes on her. His jaw dropped so fast you could almost hear it hit the floor. The color drained from his face as if he'd seen a spirit in broad daylight. Before anyone could say a word, Ikenna turned on his heels and sprinted towards the exit, shouting, "I don't want the wealth again. Keep your money. Keep everything. I'm gone." His feet barely touched the ground as he dashed out of the palace, leaving a trail of dust behind him. Ezenamdi's court erupted in laughter, and Adana's heart sank. But this was just the beginning. A few days passed, and another suitor arrived, this one a wealthy merchant named Chukwudi. He was known for his arrogance, boasting that his riches could rival even the king's. Chukwudi, dressed in rich fabrics and gold necklaces, walked into the palace courtyard with his chest puffed out. "I'm here to take what is mine," Chukwudi declared, his eyes gleaming as he imagined the fortune awaiting him. Ezenamdi, hopeful as always, gestured towards the door. "Then meet your bride. Adana, come forward." Adana stepped out once again, and as soon as Chukwudi saw her, his entire demeanor changed. His eyes widened to the size of cola nut, and his mouth trembled. He took one step back, then another, until he was almost at the edge of the courtyard. I... Chukwudi stammered, pointing at her as if words had failed him entirely. "I forgot. I left something important at home. Yes, very important. I'll be back." Without waiting for a response, he turned and ran for his life, his gold chains jangling as he bolted out of the palace, never to be seen again. Adana sighed deeply, watching another suitor run away in fear of her appearance. But her father, ever determined, assured her that the right man would come. The third suitor, however, was not given the chance to flee so easily. His name was Ibuka, the son of a wealthy farmer. Unlike the others, Ibuka had no intention of coming to the palace. He had already heard tales of Princess Adana's unfortunate looks, and he wanted no part in it. But his father, an ambitious man hungry for the king's wealth, had other plans. On the day of the visit, Ibuka was dragged into the palace courtyard, chained by his wrists. His father walked proudly beside him, yanking the chain to make sure he couldn't escape. "Papa, please," Ibuka cried, tears streaming down his face. "I don't want to marry her. I've heard the stories." "Be quiet, my son. You'll thank me when you're swimming in gold," his father replied, tightening his grip on the chain. When they reached the palace, Ezenamdi watched in bewilderment as Ibuka was forced to kneel before him. The king nodded and called out, "Adana, come greet your suitor." When Adana appeared, Ibuka's eyes grew wide with horror. He tried to pull away, but his father held him tight. "Papa, please! She's worse than I imagined. Let me go!" His father whispered harshly, "The wealth, Ibuka. Think of the wealth." Ibuka's knees shook, but he stayed, too terrified of his father's wrath to run. Days passed, and surprisingly, after spending time with Adana, Ibuka found that she was intelligent, witty, and kind. Though her appearance was still shocking to him, her personality began to shine through, and he realized that there was more to her than just looks. They shared stories by the river, laughed together, and even began to form a bond. As the wedding day approached, the entire kingdom was in a frenzy, eager to see if the unlikely marriage would happen. Ibuka had resigned himself to his fate, but deep down, he found himself caring for Adana. However, Adana had her doubts. She had seen the fear in Ibuka's eyes when they first met. Could his newfound affection be real, or was it just the lure of her father's wealth? On the morning of the wedding, as the guests gathered in the palace, dressed in their finest, Adana stood in her chamber, staring at her reflection. Despite her feelings for Ibuka, she couldn't shake the thought that he was only staying because of the wealth. When the time came for the ceremony, Adana was nowhere to be found. The court searched high and low, but the princess had disappeared, leaving behind only a note. "I cannot marry a man who may only want me for my father's gold." Ibuka stood at the altar, the chain around his wrist now loosened, his heart sinking as he realized she was gone. The guests whispered in shock, and Ezinamdi was left with a daughter still unmarried, but with her dignity intact. And so the story ended not with a marriage, but with a question. Would Adana ever return? Would Ibuka prove his love was genuine? The people of Anicha would have to wait to find out.